everybody, and welcome back. This is the first start of speaking. So first of all, I'd like to say thanks to everybody for any of the feedback you gave me from the last video. It's been really useful, and a number of people have asked what the actual flight going on in the background is. Just a filler until while the main sort of information is passed on in front of it. And basically, we are currently flying from Salzburg to the beautiful Innsbruck airport in Austria. We're currently over the Bavarian town of Rosenheim right now at about 6,000 feet, and we're making pretty good headway towards it. It's only a 20-minute flight, and yeah, wonderful weather everywhere. In today's video, we're going to be going over the general section of the operating manual, and in this section, essentially, it's a description of the plane as a whole, as well as some of the restrictions, general restrictions of the aircraft, and there's a number of diagrams that sort of aid that. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, as we delve into the chapter, we start off with a section that really describes the aircraft in a very general sense. Funnily enough, in the general chapter. Basically, it tells us that the A320 family is a subsonic medium-range civil transport aircraft. It's powered by two high-bypass turbofan engines, in our case they're CFM56 ones, and they're located under the wings. It's designed for 2 crew members to fly it, although there is space for 1 or 2 observers, depending on the fit in the cockpit. And the cabin can take different seating configurations. It could be cargo, ranging all the way up to 235 people that we cram in like sardines into an A321. From there, it also says that under the floor of the cabin, there's 2 baggage cargo holds. The forward and the aft, which is obviously used for storing things, like my many bottles of pina coladas. So when we get into the first relevant piece of information from the chapter, it comes in the form of the principal dimensions diagram. From here, the key piece of information is the wingspan of the aircraft. This is key because some taxiways around certain airports only cater for aircraft of a certain wingspan. That's 36 metres is the key number, really, and the Airbus is always within that key number, with winglets, which is as big as the wing will go, because obviously it extends outwards and curves upwards in a wonderfully beautiful modern architectural flair. And with the winglets on the 320s and 321s, it goes to 35.8 metres, obviously less than 36. With an A321 or an A320 with just the wing fences at the end, it's only 34.1 metres, which is obviously a lot more leeway. One other thing worthy of note, I think, is just how close the engines are to the ground. On the Neo, even bigger, you've only got 46 centimetres clearance. So obviously, you know, it's worthwhile keeping the more exuberant bank angles on landing under control, because you will potentially scrape the engine. So so next we have a diagram of the pressurized areas of the aircraft, and as you can see, basically the whole aircraft is pressurized. The only thing that isn't is the radome front, the landing gear bays, and the tail cone, which houses the APU. From there we come to the diagram of the antennas on the outside of the aircraft. Obviously the aircraft has a lot of radio antennas. We've got VHF antennas, 2 on the top, 1 on the bottom. We have VOR and NDB, and yeah, so ADF antennas with TCAS and transponder antennas as well, located at different points. Key ones are potentially the ILS receiver antennas, where at the front with the radome, and the radio altimeter, which is located to the aft of the aircraft, basically in its bum. And that is there because obviously it points to the bit of the aircraft's fuselage that's closest to the ground when we come in for a landing, as we're pitched up. And the radio altimeters, maybe one key bit of knowledge, knowing that this is here, is when sometimes you get a radio altimeter fail. And that can be due to just there being a lot of standing water on the ground, which is causing lots of reflections, which confuses it. So if you know that it's raining a lot, and you know the radio altimeter is there, and you maybe know there's a puddle behind the aircraft, you get radio altimeter fail, you can say, ha, it's probably this. So there's a good bit of technical knowledge you can apply. Next we have the external hatches diagrams. These denote where on the aircraft the service panels are for things such as the external electric power, which is plugged in under the nose. We've also got a panel that does the refueling, manages the refueling. That's on the right hand side, the starboard side of the aircraft, under the wing on the main fuselage. And there are other panels such as the engine oil refilling panels, which are on each of the nacelles, as well as many other uses and panels. They're all found here on this diagram should you need them. After that, we have some taxi and ground handling diagrams. The main takeaway from this really is how much room do we need to manoeuvre the aircraft around on a 180 degree turn. Essentially, the rule of thumb is you need a 32 metre wide runway for a 321 and a 30 metre wide runway for a 320 or a 319. If you want to perform this, you're going to have to offset yourself 25 degrees from the runway centerline, position yourself over the runway edge, which can feel very strange from way up in the cockpit, and then pull a hard turn to round yourself back onto the centerline. All of the dimensions are here. One other thing that's worthy of note is that when you do pull a 180 degree turn like this, your wing is going to pass in front of where your nose cone is by about 2-3 meters. It's not very much, so pulling away from stands can always feel a bit close, but that can help you judge whether or not it's safe to do so. After this, we've got a series of approach geometry diagrams. The first is the ground clearance diagram that helps us understand what pitch the aircraft can be on landing to avoid a tail strike. The key figures really are that the 321 can pitch to 9.8-ish. The 320 can go to 11.7 degrees nose up, and the 319 can go all the way up to 13.9 degrees pitch up. Although, if you can see on these diagrams, if you pitch about 8 degrees left or right, we can actually pitch the aircraft a little higher up. Not that we ever do that. We are always very careful to keep the pitch on landing under control. So, after this, you've got the ILS final approach diagram. This kind of shows that the antennas are in the nose of the aircraft, and as we're coming down, the wheels are going to actually touch down maybe about 100 meters behind where the glide slope antenna should be on the runway, if you fly it perfectly. And also note that between the 321 and the 319, there's always about 1 or 2 feet difference in height on the wheels as we go over the threshold of the runway, and this can lead to each aircraft is going to flare differently, although if you apply the same technique you will always get good returns. Following from this, we have the visual segment diagrams. Essentially, this shows that as you look out of the aircraft, you're always going to have, as you look down, you're always going to be able to meet the requirements for a Cat 2 or a Cat 3A landing in terms of the amount of visibility you need to be able to see of the runway, in terms of landing lights, where they should appear. And then finally, we have the ground visual geometry. So this shows us that 12.5 meters of the aircraft is obscured by the cowling of the cockpit, and when you're lining up on the runway, the rules are that you need 125 meters of visibility to take off. So you're going to be able to have to see 3 runway centerline lights, as runway centerline lights are spaced 30 meters apart, which will mean if you can see 3 of them plus the 12.5 meters available, obscured underneath the nose, then you will be able to have the required visibility for takeoff. That essentially rounds up all of the systems general section, and from there I figured we'd move on to the limitations bit, as this gives us some of the more key figures that we use in the day-to-day operation of the aircraft. So, starting out in the limitations section, the first thing it tells us is what the G-force limitation of the 320 is, and clean it ranges from -1g to +2.5g, and with flaps extended it reduces to 0g to positive 2g. This is aided in our control systems, as the controls physically won't let us pitch beyond these limits most of the time. Anyway, the next diagram worthy of note is the temperature graph and the environmental operational parameter of the aircraft. Essentially, there's only one of these figures I've ever really come close to, and that is the old -70 up at 39,800 feet. It gets very cold up in the the upper atmosphere up at that point, and it can go below -70 degrees. And the reason that we want to be careful about this is it can cause the fuel to ice up in the wings, so it's always worth keeping an eye on that. But this is where the temperature graph and the operational parameters can be found. Moving on from there, the manual very in quick succession states that the aircraft can't be operated on runways that have a slope of more or less than 2% gradient. Furthermore, the normal width of the runways should be 45 metres and the minimum width of the runway 30 metres. Obviously shown in the 180 degree turn ground clearance diagram, and just for safety reasons really. Beyond that, the aircraft normally shouldn't be able to land an aircraft on runways that are more than 9,200 feet high, although I am aware that some Airbuses can go up to 14,000 feet up, although there aren't that many runways up that high in the world. The max crosswind for takeoff and landing. This is a bit interesting, so it differs from the CEO to the NEO in terms of the wording, but the max demonstrated for both the aircraft itself is 38 knots. Therefore you should be able to land the aircraft at 38 knots, certainly with the CEO. The NEO is a bit different. It's certified to 35 knots, so I suppose you shouldn't really be landing more than 35 knots with a NEO, and that's due to the engine itself really. The aircraft is still good for 38 demonstrated, but it's certified for 35 knots. That's takeoff and landing. Tailwinds, 15 knots is the maximum tailwind, and you're not supposed to really use flap 3 with more than 10 knots of tailwind, and it's only use flap full on the current engine options for the CEO, for the A320 and 319, and really it's recommended that you use flap full for the 320 and the 321neo, although generally most pilots will always use flap full with more than 10 knots of tailwind. After that, there's this maximum wind speed that you can use the doors in. So you shouldn't really be opening any passenger doors if the wind speed's more than 65 knots, or you'll be blown away. Cargo doors, the limit's 40 knots, although it can go up to 50 knots if you're nose into wind, or you position the aircraft so that the cargo doors are on the leeward side, so downwind of the aircraft. Then you can use them. You should never operate the doors in more than 65 knots anyway, and it would be very particular if that was you found yourself in that location. There's a table at this point that shows the crosswind limits for landing on contaminated runways, because that can change when you're doing landing performance. It's always worth taking into account the tailwind, the crosswind limits, as well as the landing distance, and also sometimes obviously the approach speed can change as well. More constricting speeds, we have the speeds at which you can fly with the cockpit windows open when you want to be an absolute badass, put some sunglasses on, stick your head out the side of the cockpit. Hell, why not? Take up smoking. It's probably good for you. That's 200 knots. Don't fly with the window open if you go more than 200 knots. It probably wouldn't feel very nice anyway. Then we have a table that shows the flap speeds. So for the 321 it's a bit different, but when operating a 320 you start at 230, take 15 knots off every single time to go 230, 215, 200, 185. So it's always 15 knot increments to go down through the flap stages until you get to the final, which is 177, and that's the VFE flaps speed, maximum speed.
Going to 120 decimal.
321's a bit different, but I've included the figures here. Maximum speed of the aircraft as a whole, you should never be going more than 0.82 Mach or 350 miles per hour, or knots rather. Although I once heard an Airbus test pilot say that an Airbus 320 has never been damaged due to an overspeed. It has had the airframe overstressed when recovering from overspeed, but the overspeed itself has never actually caused any damage. So yeah, don't go over it, but if you do go over it, just recover the speed brakes to keep yourself safe. From then, we got the landing gear speeds. So with it flying around, with the landing gear down, you can actually go 280 knots. When you extend it though, you have to slow down to 250 to get it out before you can speed up again to go to 280. And when you retract it, you're going to have to go even slower. 220 knots is the maximum speed for retracting landing gear. Finally, there's the tyre speed as you're going along the runway, which is 195 knots. Don't go any faster than that, or the wheels will, I assume, blow themselves to pieces in spectacular fashion. And then finally we've got the minimum control speeds, which is fairly interesting. So this is the minimum speed that you have to be going to have rudder effectiveness during an engine failure on the old takeoff. And essentially for the 319 it's 108 knots. For the 320 it's 113, but for the Neo it's 116, and for the 321 it's 116. Taxi speeds in the turn, if you're over 76 tons as noted here, 20 knots, although most people don't go around a turn at more than 10 knots anyway, and you kind of get the feel for the aircraft while you're taxiing. Don't drive it like a boy racer, I suppose, is what they always say. And then the last bit is just the maximum weights of the aircraft. Now, I can't really go into too much detail here because there are so many different variations and litigations, and very rarely are aircraft all the same. But the general gist of it is a max takeoff weight for a 319 is around it's about 64 tons. The max landing weight is about 61 tons, and the max zero fuel weight is about 57 tons. 320 takeoff is 77 tons, max is landing weight is 66 tons, they're the key figures really, and the 321 max takeoff 89 tons, max landing weight 77, so it increases a bit. Tables up there. So, you eager beavers, we've come to the end of the first actual chapter video. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I know I certainly have. And in the next video we will be getting into the air conditioning system. But for now, once again, if there's any more feedback, please do give it to me. I'm always keen to make this thing a bit better. I will be turning down the air traffic control noise as much as I can and getting rid of it in future flights because I know it's a bit distracting. And yeah, why not send me ideas of where you'd like the background footage to be flying to and from, and you can find some interesting places around the world. But for now, I hope you had a good flight, and I'll see you later.